I got to interview some really successful people like the CEO of Susan G. Komen, the CMO of Sprinkles. And I found that there was this through line that, people who were really successful and really happy in their careers own their time.
I relate, absolutely. And, when I was laid off at my job from Forbes, so not a choice, I had this whole introspective of like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I was so tied to my title, so tied to that job, so tied to like being at a brand like that when I lost it suddenly, I was like, who am I?
Anytime you want big reward in your life, you're going to have to take some level of risk. Focus on the things that are important to you. You understand your values deeply, you understand your purpose, and you use those to build a brand that will catapult you to new heights.
Kelly, welcome to Talk Digital to me. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. We're not only business partners, but we are friends. So I'm so excited to talk to you. You have a really dynamic career. You left corporate, started Career Slay. So tell me, what inspired you to take this leap from corporate marketing into coaching and leadership development?
Yeah, so I had built my career building brands that touch people's lives every day. And I clocked in about 14 years on both the advertising and marketing side. And I was really just getting to what I felt was the pinnacle of my career, because I was, working on Super Bowl ads, building out South by Southwest activations, being on Good Morning America, and speaking on industry stages and getting recognized for that work, which was just so incredible. But what I realized was that while everything looked shiny on the outside, on the inside, I was really suffering. And suffering from burnout, from stress, from anxiety. And really the people in my life were the ones that were paying the cost of that. So I'd gotten home from a work trip one day and was tucking my 3-year-old daughter into bed. And I asked her, how can I be a better mommy? And she looks at me and she says, don't leave us. And it was in that moment, I just like completely like,
God.
Yeah.
I want to cry for you.
I mean, like, it was like a switch had flipped in my mind, and I realized that my priorities weren't aligned. And so I made a plan with my husband to take a career break at the end of 2023. And at first, it was supposed to just be a 6-month sabbatical. But what ended up happening was about 3 months in, like all high achievers, we start to think about what's next? What am I going to do next? And I started to feel this like miniature freak out of like, what am I going to do with my career? Is this even aligned to what I want in life anymore? And so I started to think back through what were the moments in my career that made me the most happy? Where did I find the most joy, the most purpose and fulfillment? And I had started this podcast, Career Slay, back in 2022. And I was interviewing people who loved what they did for a living. I asked them, how did you get there? What did you learn along the way? And I got to interview some really successful people like the CEO of Susan G. Komen, the CMO of Sprinkles. And I found that there was this through line that people who were really successful and really happy in their careers own their time. And so that was something that I really took away from that experience. And I wanted to find a way to make these types of conversations, these career conversations, what I did every day. And so fast forward, I had a friend who invited me to join an executive coach training. So we flew over to Columbus, Georgia. We went to this program called Vanguard 21, and we trained to become executive coaches. And I decided I was going to focus on career and leadership coaching because of, the conversations I had on Career Slay, but also because I didn't want people to kind of navigate their careers and get to this point of what they thought was success and realize that that wasn't what actually made them happy, and then feel stuck and go through a life crisis like I did. So I really wanted to focus in on high performers who are courageously developing their careers and becoming the fearless leaders that they were meant to be.
That is beautiful. I love that story. It's so inspirational. As a high achiever and very type A, I relate, absolutely. And, when I was laid off at my job from Forbes, so not a choice, I had this whole introspective of like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know? I was so tied to my title, so tied to that job, so tied to like being at a brand like that when I lost it suddenly, I was like, who am I? And I had to really, take a step back and reevaluate what was going to make me happy.
Yeah, it can feel like an identity shift because we work, more than anything else in our, day to day. And so when you take away your title, you take away your salary, your team, it can feel like all of the things that made you are now gone. And so that's something that I really like to work with my clients on a lot is like, how do we detach our identity from our jobs? And it's even as simple as, when you go to a cocktail party, instead of asking someone like, what do? You could ask them, what do you like to do? And I think even just that shift starts to put less pressure on our jobs to occupy our entire identity.
Yeah. I realized that I tied so much of my identity, exactly what you were saying, to my job. When my husband, when he would go and meet people, that's not the first question he asked, but really? I would ask that. I would go, hi, I'm Nikki. Like, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
And like my husband was like, that's so weird that is the first thing you ask. And I'm like, because I tied so much of myself to like, I'm the director of marketing at Forbes. Like, I was so proud of that. And I lived and breathed that every day that I wanted to know what everyone else was doing because I thought everyone else tied their identity to their jobs. And then I realized that like, no, that's just, a lot of people are like, that's just what I do. Like not who I am. And that took a lot of like, taking a step back and going, oh, what do I like to do?
Right. And I mean, just to take that a step further, we tie our worth to the economic value that we create. And so when you're not making a salary or when you're taking a career break or when you're in between jobs, it can feel like I lost my identity and I lost my worth as a human being. And that's not true. It just isn't true. And so I think what's so important is to remember the values that you hold and the things that you prioritize in your life and the role you play in other people's lives to really bring out that fullness of a person.
You mean when you were a little girl, you didn't want to grow up to optimize KPIs for the overall business goals of a company?
Actually, when I grew up, I said I wanted to be president, which I know is not possible, but
oh my God, that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, we won't open that can of worms, but all right.
So let's talk about something a little personal. Your journey took a major turn in 2020 when you were diagnosed with breast cancer while pregnant. Just horrible, but the experience would go on to reshape anyone's perspective, and it really reshaped how you redefined your approach to career, leadership, and personal branding. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in 2020, I was walking into a Super Bowl meeting, and at the time I was working on Doritos, and I saw my phone ring, and it was my doctor. I had done some tests previously, so I stepped outside and found a small conference room, and I answered this call, and it was a call that would change my life forever. My doctor, in her shaky, scared voice, told me, "I'm so sorry, Kelly, it is cancer." And so at 30 years old, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. What was crazy about that experience was that, as you had mentioned, a few weeks prior, I found out I was pregnant. So my first baby, and I hadn't even told my parents yet that I was pregnant. And now I had to tell them in one sitting that I was pregnant and I had cancer all in the same breath. So it was really terrifying because I didn't know anyone who was going through the same thing. And my doctor had only treated one other person who had this similar situation. So I was essentially being shuffled from doctor to doctor, trying to figure out, what the solution was. It felt like being in a bad science experiment. And, at the same time, like I'd never thought I would show that many people my boobs. So it was just, right. It was wild times. But after I had gotten diagnosed, so this was at the end of February, at the beginning of March in 2020, the pandemic broke out. And so,
oh my God, just so many things happening at once.
Yes, it was a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, and really just kind of flying by the seat of our pants on trusting in our doctors and the people who were advising us on what to do. So I remember going into my surgery, walking into an empty hospital. It looked like a zombie apocalypse because I was the only person there. I didn't even have anyone to check in with. And just thinking like, this is such a wild time. Luckily, everything went smoothly. I was able to beat cancer and, through God's grace, with grit and with the courage of my daughter, who is really the only person who was with me the entire time through that process.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, she really gave me the courage that I needed to get through that experience. And so coming out of that, I thought cancer was going to be a career crusher. I honestly thought that, I was going to fall behind. And that was a silly thought.
What a horrible thing to have to think of in the back of your mind when you're going through one of the worst things that anyone could go through.
Right. And what was interesting was my career was the only normal, stable thing in my life at the time because it was the pandemic, because everything was shutting down. My husband, who works in film production, he had to go on unemployment. He couldn't find work. And so I put all of this pressure on myself and my career to be the stable one, to be the one who provided for my family, to be the one who was going to have the health insurance plan. So what I realized coming out of that was how intertwined our personal and our professional lives are, and the importance of having that alignment to support both. And so the other thing I realized was just how important it was to love what you did for a living, because we spend so much time doing our jobs.
Yeah.
And it's important to find that passion, find that purpose in your life, because when things get hard, when you have challenges, finding that purpose is going to be the thing that gives you the strength to push through.
Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible to hear your story. You're so strong, and I love hearing it, but it's, it makes me so emotional because it's just you're such an incredible person. And
thank you.
I am just so proud of just everything that you've overcome, and just such a great mom and just a great friend. And I just really,
oh man, bust out the tissues.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible.
I feel like my journey has led me to find people like you, because otherwise I don't think I would have found the courage to make bigger changes, to take more risks, to step outside of my comfort zone. Because, when I started my career, success to me was get a good job, climb the corporate ladder, make a good salary, and then you'll be happy. That was success.
That was what we were promised.
Right. That was what we were promised. And then you go through those things, you get to a certain level in your career, and then you realize that you've been told maybe someone else's version of success and not your own.
When you hit the top and then you look around and you're like, oh, I'm not fulfilled yet. I'm not.
Yeah.
There are other things in my life that I need to fulfill my happiness. And you realize it wasn't the millennial rom-com dream.
Yeah. Yes.
Being the magazine editor in your studio apartment in New York City. It's just, there's so many other things that go along with that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So speaking of dream careers, you've really worked with some incredible brands. I mean, you've got Frito-Lay, Pepsi, Chick-fil-A under your belt, avocados from Mexico. So you were leading massive campaigns, Super Bowl ads, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. What was one key lesson from your marketing career that you now take onto your coaching?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you two lessons. The first is that you can take your strategic planning and put that towards your career as well, your life and your career.
Interesting.
So I actually came home one day from a strategic planning session. It was a long-term strategic plan that we were doing. I think it was at Frito-Lay. And I came home to my husband and I was like, look, I'm using all of my brain power to plan out the next 3 years for a company. We should at least like jot down what are our key goals for the next 5 years or the next, 10 years. And so we got out like this little envelope and I wrote down, today is like 2018 and I charted out like 5 years from now. And we started to write down our collective goals and the things that we wanted to accomplish in our life. And fast forward to 2023. So I think some of the things were like, we're going to sell our house. We're going to figure out whether or not I stay at this job. He's going to start his company. The final thing that was on there was, and I kid you not, this is like 5 years from when we started, was I was going to take a career break. And so I tell people just the power of, planning out your life. Obviously, things are going to happen where not everything is going to go as planned, but I think there's something to be said about setting an intention for your life and putting in that same rigor of strategic planning that you could do in your day-to-day job and transferring that over to, building out a roadmap for your own career.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'll say is that really great creative work requires courage. And so anytime you want big reward in your life, you're going to have to take some level of risk. And so how do you do that in coaching? Well, it's getting unstuck. It's like finding the people that you want to surround yourself with who are going to become your board of directors and your advisors on the journey.
Love that.
Yeah. And it's also believing in yourself that just because you've done something the same way for many years, it doesn't mean that that's who you are. You could always stretch yourself. You can always grow. And growth is always going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Brand Me, which we're both co-founders of, and we have a workshop coming up. Very excited about.
Yes.
What was it being a part of Brand Me that made you say, I have to do this?
Yeah, so I've known Yvonne Kinzer for a few years now. She was my boss, and I wanted to work for her because of her personal brand.
Yeah.
Like, I saw the personal brand that she built, and I was like, I want to learn from this woman. And so she's been an amazing mentor and sponsor for me. She literally opened doors when I said, I want to start speaking like in the industry. What can I do? And she taught me how to do that. And so when she decided that she wanted to now move into personal branding and asked if I wanted to join her, I just hopped on that opportunity. And I think, especially in this day and age when people are having such a hard time finding their footing in their careers, like your personal brand can be such a powerful tool to unlock that special sauce that you have, that narrative, and also like build relationships within your network. So I think there's a lot of value in teaching people the tools that I've learned over the course of building brands in my career and now applying that to people's lives.
Yeah. When I first met Yvonne, I had just been laid off from Forbes and I was, a little lost, and I met her at Brand Week and I sat beside her and we just started talking, and she was just like, you need to own who you are. And gave me the most inspirational speech I've ever heard. And I was like, who is this woman? And like, how do I surround myself with her all the time? And she has that just like presence. And that is how like I ended up just getting, and then we met through LinkedIn.
Yes.
And bonded over the fact that we both have a hip, hip
we both have hip dysplasia. That's like and you're like, maybe like two people that I've known in my life.
Yeah, I think you might be the only other person.
Really? Oh God, it's not just in dogs.
Everyone's like Labrador retrievers. I'm like, yes, add 2% of humans.
Right.
And it's just so funny. And then we all came together in this like amazing group, and it's such a fun thing to be a part of.
Well, what's interesting is that it was our personal brands that drew us to one another. Because when you have that just infectious energy, like you want to be surrounded with people who are charismatic, who understand like who they are, what they bring to the table. And so there's so much to learn from that.
No, I love it. So you work with professionals who are navigating career transitions, leadership growth, and personal branding. Why do you think personal branding is more important than ever? Kind of like you just talked about how it like brings people in.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, mainly because I think the creator economy has grown so much. AI is transitioning like our jobs at the speed of light. And so it really comes back to what's the human element of it all. And so if you can build your personal brand to extend an emotional connection to the people that you're networking with, the folks that you're building relationships with, that at the end of the day is really going to get you further in your career than the awards or the accolades that you receive. It's really about building your network. And so how do you do that in a way that's authentic, that is a consistent narrative? Well, you focus on the things that are important to you, understand your values deeply, you understand your purpose, and you use those to build a brand that will catapult you to new heights.
I love that. So telling your story and like how I say this all the time, and I know it's just so cliche, but it's your network is your net worth.
100%.
It's who you know, what you're putting out there in the world. And I always say, if you're not telling your story, someone else will tell it for you.
Yes.
And you're so much more than your resume and just a list of accomplishments, awards, as you were saying, like, you know, the brands that you've worked for. While it's so impressive, the Frito-Lay, the Pepsi stuff, the avocados from Mexico, you know, Milam and I talked about while he was on my podcast that's not going to be on your gravestone.
No,
like it's not going to be like, Kelly was incredible at brands. Yeah. And like, it's who you are.
I sold a lot of chips.
Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, her Super Bowl ads were amazing.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be about the fact that you were an incredible mom, that you're a breast cancer survivor, that you helped people navigate their careers to happiness.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, and I think that's just so powerful. And I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, was that our identity is not what we do for a living. It's the values that we embody each and every day and the behaviors that come out of those values. I like to tell people, it's kind of grim, but think about your core values and think about, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral?
Yep.
Those become the things that, you know, create the North Star in your life. Because if you want to be known as someone who's generous, who's courageous, who's kind, who's authentic, then you have to take the actions that reiterate those values each and every single day. And that doesn't matter like what role you hold or what position you're doing. Those values will carry with you in each and every job.
Yeah. And sharing your expertise is great. I do it all the time on LinkedIn, but no one's going to stand up at my funeral and be like, Nikki was amazing at marketing. Yeah. Like, I hope not.
I'll
That's
do it.
so embarrassing. Yeah, please do. Everyone just goes, what?
Yeah.
I love it. So many people assume that personal branding is just about building a social media presence, but Brand Me goes so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
What makes this program different, and what can people expect when they come to our workshop?
Right. So I think what's important when you're establishing a brand, it's about understanding your why. Because it can get so draining to just think of it as like content creation or posting every single day. And it goes so much deeper than that. You know, building a brand starts with understanding what is your story that you want to tell, what is the purpose behind, you know, what you do each and every single day. For me, I found that purpose in helping high performers courageously develop their careers and become the fearless leaders that they were meant to be. And when I think about my brand as in the career context, it's like if I am living out those two things and I'm helping people in those two ways, then I am consistently, pushing out my brand in a way that is authentic to me. So what people will get from Brand Me is just the tools to understand their purpose, their values, and their strengths, and then use those tools to catapult and really create thought leadership that will help make them distinctive thought leaders in the spaces that they want to be known in. Of course, you're going to learn the amazing LinkedIn techniques and Instagram techniques to really bolster your social media presence. But at the end of the day, I think where the value comes from is in the networking, the people who are going to be in the room who are also in that headspace of wanting to build their personal brands.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have the tools to be able to do that. But the first thing you need to do is, what is the value you're bringing to the table? Understanding your why is a perfect thing to say for that. And I think that's what so many people are going to get out of Brand Me, listening to me, you, Yvonne, and Milam talk about, like, here's why we show up every day.
Yeah.
Here's what we're trying to do. We want to tell our stories. I want to tell other people's stories by interviewing people on my podcast. Same with you.
Yeah.
Like pushing leaders forward. Then we'll give you the tools to kind of build that and what you need to do to produce content every day without burning yourself out, because it can be so easy to burn yourself out. I really am cautious about that. As I take breaks when I'm needed. I don't care that the algorithm gets mad at me if I'm not posting every day. I need to take a step back sometimes and go, okay. And you need that time for yourself. But I know that I'm showing up for these people that have been following me, going, okay, I want to see what her career path was. What is she sharing?
Right.
The humor that I share, so that people have a little bit of a laugh. The millennials.
You are
I like
funny.
to summon the millennials.
I love your content. You're so funny.
I like to make people laugh. I mean, it's a joy of mine. I like to see people go, okay, like, that's funny. I'm going to share that. And then as well as telling my stories, like today's post was about a toxic job I was at. So I sprinkle a little bit of, I've had some hard times, but also like Fridays, I like to be like, hey, millennials.
Yes. Every time you post a millennial joke, I'm like, I feel seen.
I know, they come out of the woodwork. I summon all the millennials from LinkedIn, and they're just like, we're here.
Yeah.
I love it. It's amazing.
I love it.
So your mission with Career Slay is about helping people slay the fear in career. I love that. Slay the fear in career is amazing. What's one of the biggest fears you see holding professionals back from reaching their full potential?
Yes. Oh, this is good. We talked about the identity piece. We talked about building your personal brand and putting yourself out there. But I think the other thing that holds people back, and where there's a lot of fear still, is finding the courage to take a break or to slow down when we feel like we have just so much demanding of us. And it's really easy to get caught up on the hamster wheel, to climb, to think that this is, going to make us happy. But when things are no longer aligned and you feel that misalignment because something feels off, like maybe it's your family is like, where are you? We miss you. Or you haven't taken a vacation in a really long time, or you just feel absolutely burnt out and you just don't feel like you can take a break. I think it's so important in those moments to find the courage to take a break and slow down. And what I realized in my own life, first of all, it's a huge privilege to be able to take a sabbatical. So I'm really grateful for that. But what slowing down enabled for me was it gave me the reflection and the time to refocus on what is my end goal? What is my North Star? How can I actually aim at the thing that I want, not just the thing that society told me to do?
It's a hard balance.
It is super hard. And it's scary because everyone else is running the race alongside you. And so you might feel like you're going to be behind, but it's, going back to being strategic about your career. If you have that self-awareness and that introspection, then it really doesn't matter what everyone else is doing, because as long as you're focusing on your goals and what's going to make you happy and fulfilled, then everything else is just noise.
Yeah. It's a comparison is the thief of joy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you've coached executives, founders, and even aspiring Olympic athletes. Very cool. What's one underrated skill that truly helps someone stand out as a confident and influential leader?
Yeah. So what's ironic is it's listening.
Makes perfect sense.
So what I've learned in being a coach and really helping people unlock that next level of leadership is that a lot of us love to hear the sound of our voice. I mean, you and I our podcast hosts. So
we are prime examples.
we get that.
Yep.
But what's harder to do is to listen with intent, to listen to understand. And when you do listen, you start to actually identify the root cause of the problems. And so when you understand the problem, then you can provide a better solution, or you can coach people to, empower them to find a solution. So I think a lot of us think that leadership is loud. It doesn't have to be loud. It can actually be something that is more intentional, and listening is a huge part of that.
Yeah, active listening is something I try to practice a lot. It's hard because you're constantly thinking of the next thing that you're supposed to say, and instead of taking in and then balancing that out, it's a practice that I have to try and practice all the time.
Right. And I think the other thing about it too is that when you're actively listening, you're building connections with people. You're
understanding.
You're understanding them. You're being empathetic. It's building your emotional intelligence. So you're having that, awareness of what's going on. So I think it's such an underrated skill, and especially in a society that, prioritizes executive presence.
Yeah.
So that's what I like to, exhibit for my clients, but I encourage them to do the same thing.
No, I think that's great. I wish that more leaders would see that and listen instead of talking at people, that they talk, like they listen and they are there. And I love what you said about leadership isn't loud. Mm-hmm. It's, it's impactful, and it's listening and understanding what people are going through.
Yeah.
So imposter syndrome is something I want to talk about. As our high-performing selves and very type A, we are very prone to imposter syndrome, which a lot of people will be surprised by. They see these people that are rising to the top, and they're like, they can't be. But all of us are going, are we supposed to be here? Am I doing it right? So what advice do you give to someone who feels like they're not ready to put themselves out there, especially when it comes to personal branding? I hear it a lot where they're like, I love what you're doing on LinkedIn, but I could never. And I'm like, you could.
Yeah. First of all, number one, everyone has it. Like every single person has it. Like I've spoken to CEOs, CMOs, every single person has imposter syndrome. And
took me a long time to figure that out.
Right. So I think when you destigmatize it, it's not just you, then you can start to deal with it. Right. And it's about, even if you're afraid, you can still show up and move. You can still be doing the thing while you're scared.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I think that's common for everyone who is putting themselves out there and who is building their personal brand. I even feel that way all the time, where I'm like, who the heck wants to listen to me? Who cares about my story? Can you just stop talking about your breast cancer journey? So it's like how I like to reframe it is, what would people gain from me sharing this part of myself? Mm-hmm. And what I've found in my own journey is that when I share about my breast cancer journey, when I share about my struggles balancing work and life and being a working mother, there are so many people who come out of the woodwork to say, thank you for sharing that, because I feel seen, I feel less alone. I've had women come up to me and say, I went and I got checked and we found something. And
it's incredible.
When those moments, come to the surface, I think it makes the fear of being rejected or people criticizing you.
Makes it worth it.
It makes it worth it, because I'd much rather have someone have a better outcome because they got checked for breast cancer early on than me being embarrassed about something that I said.
No, I think it's incredible that you're inspiring people to really take their health seriously and, making an impact in people's lives. Even in the smallest ways, I get thanked for just sharing stories on LinkedIn. Today is a good example. I shared about the dream job was actually a nightmare. And I went on this thing about they painted this picture of a job that was not what was reality. And I put it out there, and at first you go, is anyone even going to care about this? This is my story, all stuff. even on the way here, I got 2 people in my inbox going, thank you. I just got out of a nightmare job.
Wow.
I had this happen to me years ago. It took me years to recover. And I'm like, I forget that like there are so many people that need to hear this because they think they're alone in this situation. And then I'm like, no, we have been there. We've all had these scenarios where we were promised something. That was not the case. And just even that small of a story is so impactful to people that you don't realize until you put it out there. And then it makes it all worth it when people are sliding into my inbox, because people go, don't you worry about work, caring that you're sharing about toxic jobs and things like that? And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not talking about them. So. But it's like, yeah, it can be scary to see like, okay, is leadership going to care that I'm like sharing these stories? But then it makes it all worth it when people are going, thank you for sharing that. I needed to hear that today.
Right. And I mean, I think in going through the exercise of establishing your personal brand, you start to create boundaries of like what you're willing to share, what you're not willing to share. And
it's different for everyone. I don't expect everyone to go on and be like, hey, share all the terrible things that happened in your jobs. And like, cause like to each their own. I made that choice at this point in my career that I feel comfortable sharing those things now.
Absolutely.
I don't care if a person looks at me in my next career move and they go, I'm not going to hire her in case she blasts me on LinkedIn, then you have something to be blasted about. So that is my thought process.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. And I think so it's different for everyone. It depends on your personality. It depends on the story that you want to tell and how do you want to impact the world. So I think that's where it comes down to is like, what's your story? What's the narrative that you want to share? And how can your story transform people's lives? Because, you know, to your point, making someone feel less alone when they feel like their only option is to be stuck in a toxic job, like by getting them out of that mindset, like it can change their career trajectory.
Yeah. There's so many things when I write, I think 5-10 years ago, if I were on here and I read it, like what would I think and what would this change for me? Because so many people weren't sharing these things early in our careers. We just thought we like, this is just how it is and we have to stick it out. And this might be a toxic job, but this is okay. I would have loved to hear from someone that like, hey, you don't have to put up with this. Hey, these are the things that you're going to learn from these things. And I'm at a point in my career where I'm like, here's all the things that I learned and it made me a better leader. Yeah. And I've got good leaders that I've learned from and I've got bad leaders and I just share all of it.
Yeah. It's that self-awareness that really unlocks leadership growth.
It forms you into who you don't want to be as a leader and who you do want to be as a leader.
Right.
So if someone listening today wanted to take the next step to building their personal brand with confidence, what would you tell them to do right now? Starting today, one easy thing would be to first buy your URL. Ooh, so like, that's a good one.
Yeah. So actually that I owe to Yvonne Kinzer. She told me, she was like, buy your URL.
I love that. That's such an Yvonne thing to say.
Create your website. Well, it took me a while to create the website, but at least buy the URL of your name. So kellypoquizburke.com. And I think that in and of itself is like taking that small step to say, I'm a brand. Like I'm going to own my story. I'm going to own my narrative and I'm going to tell my story in an authentic way.
I love that. That's so funny. It's like buy your URL. That's like the advice. It's like so Yvonne to be like, that's like something that when I first met her, she would tell me like I love her. It's incredible. So what's one thing you're most excited about as Brand Me continues to grow?
I'm really just excited to take the tools that I've learned in building billion-dollar brands and apply that to people's lives. Because I think there's so much more purpose and fulfillment in that. I mean, I could sell you chips or an avocado all day, but to really be able to get someone to find the courage to put themselves out there and knowing the power of how it can transform not just their career, but how they show up in every space of their lives. I think that's something that really gets me excited to do this.
Yeah, I'm really excited for all of us to come together. We have all these different skills and expertise and backgrounds to share as someone is really getting started and to figure out their why, to build their tools in their toolbox to be able to go out and do this.
Yeah.
For someone who's on the fence about joining our workshop in April, what would you say to them? Why is now the best time to invest in personal branding?
Absolutely. The job market is crazy right now.
It's unfortunate. But
yes. People are really struggling to get their footing, to put themselves out there, to find, the right opportunities. And I think going back to what we said, your network is your net worth. When you start to build your personal brand and you start to connect with other people who are taking that seriously, I think that can really accelerate the opportunities that come across, your desk. We met because we met on LinkedIn.
Yep.
We were both posting on LinkedIn. I mean, you cold reached out. And so
I loved what you were doing. I wanted to tell you. And I was like, we need to talk.
Right. And so I think things like that, you just never know where opportunities will come from. But if you keep yourself small, keep playing small, hide who you are, no one will know your greatness. And so that's what I would just say is like, be intentional about building your brand because you're going to have one, whether or not
someone will tell your story for you.
Exactly.
Yep. Before we wrap, where can people find you, follow your work, and stay connected?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Kelly Poquiz Burke. That's looks like Pop Quiz without the second P.
I think that every time I see your name. I'm like, Kelly Pop Quiz Burke.
Yes, Kelly Pop Quiz Burke. It'll come
You
up.
should really own that as your brand.
I absolutely should have just bought the URL for that. And then they can find me on careerslate.com.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you for having me. I had the best time.